This is 2012's Walking the Halls. Warning, spoilers ahead. We open up to Casey, and she talks about how she's made some bad choices that she wishes she could undo. As memories flood Casey's mind, she tells us that she's a senior in high school, and we go back 1 month. The school is bustling with students as they get ready to go to class, and Casey stops by her locker. Emma stops by to have her check her math homework, and they spot the 3 it girls walking the halls. Everyone looks on as they pass by, and Emma admits that she absolutely hates them. After that, Casey heads outside to meet up with her boyfriend, Jeremy, and she tries to confirm their date later on. Meanwhile, the it girls watch everyone pass by, and they look for a new prospect when Jeremy and Casey walk by. Jeremy breaks up with Casey, and she can't believe that he actually likes someone else. Jeremy tries to tell her that she can feel free to date any of his friends, and he leaves her with that. Jeremy's about as low as you can get in high school. He even asks her to give back a stuffed animal he got her so that he can give it to his new girlfriend. Just glad she corrects him and puts him in his place in the middle of the quad. Thank you, Casey. After her outburst, Casey storms off, and Amber thinks that she's the one. Kylie can't believe that she's picking her, but the campus officer is watching them as well. Across town, Holly checks out a restaurant that's for sale, and Maggie tries to sell her on the spot. Holly quickly agrees, and the two of them go into business together. Back at school, Amber decides to approach Casey, and she invites her to the club with Taylor and Kylie. Casey can't believe they're actually talking, but Amber tells her that she'll get her a fake ID to go to the bar with them if she changes her mind. That evening, Holly and Christopher sit to discuss the restaurant business over dinner, and it's not going well. Casey breaks up the argument by mentioning which college she's deciding to go to. Christopher here's a questionable man. Nothing seems to make him happy, but he's got a point about making money. He tries to explain to Holly that she won't see a profit from the restaurant for quite some time, and they need all the money they can get to help Casey with the school she wants. It's one of those times where he's talking sense, but the way he's doing it makes him seem like a jerk. Casey excuses herself, and Christopher goes to take a business call. That Friday, Casey decides to go out with the girls, and they introduce her to Max and Roger. Max is completely caught up in Casey, and the others go out on the dance floor. After a moment, Amber spots the campus officer, Jack, and she starts teasing him. Things get really crazy when everyone starts going their own way, and Casey and Max even start making out in the booth. Amber and Jack watch Casey move in on Max, and Amber says that she'll be perfect. Suddenly, Taylor shows up to say Kylie's in trouble, and they all run to the bathroom where Kylie and Roger just finished up some fun time. Roger's refusing to pay, and Jack makes it clear that Kylie's services aren't free. Wow, a high school hooker ring. Amber does make sure that Casey's 18 before bringing her out tonight, so at least they aren't bringing in underage girls, but still. This is another one of those movies where you wonder if people are stupid enough to throw away their future for a little money. Back in the club, Max asks Casey if she'll head out with him, and she agrees. Jack watches as they leave, and he gives Max the go-ahead. Max takes Casey to his hotel room, and he takes her to the bedroom where he wastes no time in moving forward. As they're getting closer, Jack appears outside the door, and he heads down the hallway after listening. Later, Casey goes back home, and Holly confronts her for coming home so late. She immediately calls her out for drinking, and Christopher comes downstairs. Chris literally just sends Casey up to bed, and tells Holly that she needs to relax. Chris isn't winning Father or Husband of the Year awards anytime soon. Holly heads upstairs, and she sees Chris's phone vibrate for a voicemail. She listens to it and hears the woman that he's cheating on her with. When Chris comes upstairs, Holly immediately calls him out for having an affair, but he denies all of it and walks away. The next day, Casey goes to hang out by the pool with her new friends, and Amber gives her share of the money from Max. Casey can't believe that she was technically hooking, but the other girls try to convince her that this isn't a bad thing. Casey grabs the money and walks off, but Amber knows that she'll be back. Casey wasn't too mad about things though, she still took the money. She'd be a fool to leave it. Back home, Holly has Maggie over to talk about Chris's affair, and she says that she's going to file for a divorce. Maggie tells her that she's there for emotional support, but she wants to look at the finances before she says anything. Later, Casey heads over to Max's apartment, and she gives him the money back. She calls him out for buying her, but Max swears that he meant everything that he said to her. He wants to keep seeing her, and he says that if taking the money bothers her, he hopes that they can just see each other still. So she just wants another boyfriend. Granted, Max is a more mature one than Jeremy, but still. He literally gets her tickets to an event and tells her that he'll see her next weekend, for free. Back at the house, Holly goes online to check the bank accounts, and it turns out that Chris already emptied both accounts. Meanwhile, Casey has a morale battle with herself as she wonders if she should take the money or not. Also, Max calls Jack as he's getting it on with Amber, and Jack assures him that his girls will be more discreet from now on. Amber tries to defend Casey, but Jack thinks that she's going to blow their whole operation. Back at the house, Holly waits for Chris at the door, and she questions him on where the savings went. He tells her that he put all the money into a hedge fund, but the market crashed. Holly's furious because that money was savings for Casey's college fund, and she tells him that she wants a divorce. Well, this obviously goes downhill fast. This goes from a simple discussion to a physical altercation in about 30 seconds flat. I don't think that there's any saving this family. I don't know where Holly's going, though. They just proved that she has no accessible money. Across town, Casey goes to the planetarium that Max got her tickets to, and Amber tries calling her. Casey heads home after that, and she finds Chris getting arrested. Casey heads inside to find her mother, and Holly explains the situation to her. Casey tries to ask if it's too late, but Holly tells her that it is too late for that. When Casey finds out that the money's gone, she gets furious, and she calls Holly out for going about things in the worst way possible. Later that night, Casey heads to the same club, and she starts drinking the bar dry. Across the room, Jack's client asks if Casey is his, and he excuses himself to get Amber. Amber heads over to Casey to see what's going on, and Casey spills her guts on her family. Amber asks if they thought about their conversation, and Casey regrets giving the money back to Max. When Amber tells Casey about how much money she can make on a usual night or weekend, she made me question what I'm doing for a minute. Needless to say, Casey comes around in light of everything going on. Meanwhile, Jack sells his client on Casey, and he has Kylie go get her. Casey's a little hesitant at first, but after a few more drinks, she's all about him. In the morning, she wakes up in the man's hotel bed, and she goes to get paid by Amber. It turns out she made over $1,000 for the night before, and she heads home afterwards. When she gets home, Holly starts questioning her, but when she finds the money in her wallet, she gets really upset. Casey tells her that she got the money from Chris before she had her arrested, and she gives her half. Later, Casey goes shopping with the girls, and Holly decides to snoop around Casey's room. She finds the concert tickets that Max gave her, and she sees the date marked on the calendar. Pretty soon, Holly's going to have Max and Casey arrested. Casey grabs a bite to eat with the girls, and she's surprised to find out that Jack is the one behind all of this. Jack calls Taylor out for getting high again, and he tells her that he won't book her any more jobs until she's clean. After that, she tells Casey that he's got a big client coming that might be interested in her. Casey decides to ask why he became a pimp, and she asks about the cut he takes from them. Jack is not a fan of this conversation, but he tries to be as modest as possible. The next day at school, Casey catches up with Emma, and Emma wants to know if Amber can give her a fake ID too. Casey warns her to stay away from the club, and she goes her own way. That night, Casey sneaks out to meet Jack's important client, but Holly follows her quietly. Is this guy gonna get the 2-for-1 mother and daughter special? Actually, Holly pulls out the opposite direction and somehow manages to follow Casey still. Explain this movie magic to me. Casey eventually gets to the hotel, and the concierge makes a note of her arrival. She goes upstairs to meet with the client, and he tells her that he'll be right with her. Meanwhile, Holly comes to the concierge to ask if she's seen her daughter, but he tells her that he's here to protect the privacy of all his clients. He also admits that this isn't the first night that she's been here, and he's sure that she can handle herself another night. When Holly raises her voice, he threatens to call security and she walks away. 3 hours later, Casey comes downstairs to find Holly waiting, and Holly thinks that she's caught up in something that she can't get out of. She even admits to finding the tickets and date marked on the calendar. Holly needs to stop putting all of this business out there for everyone to hear. If Jack finds out about this, he'll have her head. By the end of the argument, Casey moves out, and she tries to call Chris. Chris is with his lover, though, and he lies and says that he's staying in a studio with no room to spare. Casey heads to Amber's house next, and she finally gets a place to stay. Amber assures her that she can stay here for as long as she wants, and she tells her to take a nice hot bath and get some rest. In the morning, Chris goes home to take all of his things out to the house, and he tells Holly that Casey called. He congratulates her on kicking everyone out of her life, and he tells her that he'll be back for the rest. Meanwhile, Amber tells Casey that she can make $5,000 this afternoon. She could literally work 1 or 2 afternoons a month and she'll be set. Yes, please. It actually takes a little bit of convincing to get Casey on board because it's a threesome with Amber and the client. She actually had to be convinced. Casey's holding on to her morals for sure. Jack drives the girls to the client's house, and he assures them that he'll be waiting right there for them. The girls head up to the house, which doesn't look like a place for someone who pays $10,000 for a threesome, but when they get inside, they find all sorts of fine art. Eventually, the man makes his presence known, but when he goes to get drinks, Casey calls him ugly and disgusting. Little does she know that he can hear her, and he calls her out for being unprofessional. He has the girl sit next to him, and he whispers what he wants into their ears. Casey can't do it though, and she storms out on the client. When she comes out, Jack stops her, and he hits her to prove her place in the grand scheme of things. How does she get away? She stabs her heel into his toe. Oh, that's definitely a pain I don't want to feel. Jack fires her and gives her the warning to keep her mouth shut, but I really don't think that's going to be a problem. She has no reason to shut him down so long as he doesn't try coming after her for something. Speaking of discreetness, Casey decides to run to Max for comfort. Oh, fantastic. Casey runs into Taylor while she's finishing up with Max, and he tries to explain that he wasn't expecting her until that night. Casey has nothing to say, and she storms out. She walks the street all day until she gets to a corner where a girl's working, and she starts thinking about what she's doing. After walking some more, she calls Holly to come pick her up. and she literally tells her everything. Her one requirement was to keep quiet about the operation, then she turns around and tells Holly that Jack will kill her for saying something. Casey would have been better off handling the police on her own instead of pulling Holly into this. Casey did a brave thing in coming clean though, I'll give her that. After reassuring Casey that she'll love her no matter what, the two of them hold each other. Casey thinks that they should just move, but Holly assures her that they'll get through this. The next day, Holly goes into the school to request a transfer, and the principal asks if anything's wrong, and Holly tells her everything that she knows. So, who does the principal bring in? Jack, the campus officer. Well, that's a done deal. After work, Jack goes to Amber to tell her that he has to end Casey, and he points out that he and her would end up going to jail for a long time if Casey spills the beans. After that, Amber reluctantly gets on board. At the house, Holly tells Casey that she talked to the principal, and she asks if anyone else was a part of the conversation. Just then, the doorbell rings and Casey goes to answer. It's Amber, and she tells Casey to open the door so she can talk about Jack. And surprise, Jack and Amber barge in and tie them up. Now Holly understands why Casey said not to tell anyone. Jack leaves Amber there with the gun to watch them as he goes to get Chris. When Chris gets out of work, Jack stalks him in the parking lot before taking him hostage. Back at the house, Casey tries to reason with Amber, but Amber thinks that this is her only option. Holly tries to say that Jack is just taking advantage of her, but Amber thinks that this is what freedom is for her. Meanwhile, Jack tells Chris that Casey has been one of his girls, and Chris can't believe what he's hearing. As they get closer to the house, Holly points out that Amber will be next, since she'll be a witness to murder. But Amber's conflicted. She literally has a change of heart at the worst possible time. She waited until Jack and Chris literally pulled into the driveway to try and untie them. They'd been driving for at least an hour. My goodness. Now that Chris is part of the party, Jack explains that he's going to be the one to take out Holly and Casey so that Jack can frame it all on him. When Jack goes to finish things, Amber turns her weapon on him, but it turns out that it's not loaded. Casey and Holly finish getting out of their bings, and Casey runs for a weapon. She manages to hit Jack, but he quickly overpowers her. Holly grabs his weapon and puts him down just in time. Jack sits there against the post, and he's gone by the time Amber gets to them. In the end, Amber ends up moving out of state, and the other girls were essentially disowned after the news got out. Casey goes back to being her old self, and then the credits roll. This is one of those movies that makes you wonder if they based it on a true story, but just not a good one. The acting in this one isn't bad at all, but there are quite a few cringy moments to enjoy. Give it a shot. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more like this one. Comment what you think I should watch next, and I'll see you in the next video.